The breakfast rush always began before sunrise. By 6 o'clock every morning, the little corner cafe on Maple Street filled with the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee, sizzling bacon, and warm cinnamon rolls. Regular customers shuffled through the doors with sleepy eyes, grabbing breakfast before work, while the staff hurried from table to table with practiced smiles. Emily Carter had worked there for nearly 3 years. At 26, she looked older than her age. Long shifts, unpaid bills, and endless worry had stolen much of the youthful sparkle from her face. Still, she greeted every customer with genuine kindness, believing that even a simple smile could brighten someone's difficult day. She needed the job more than anyone knew. Since her parents had died in a tragic car accident 4 years earlier, Emily had become both sister and guardian to her 16-year-old brother, Noah. Between rent, groceries, school expenses, and Noah's expensive medical treatments, every dollar she earned disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. She had long ago given up her dream of attending nursing school. Now survival came first. Among all the cafe's regular customers, one man remained the greatest mystery. Every weekday morning, without fail, a sleek black luxury sedan stopped outside the cafe at exactly 7 o'clock. The driver would open the rear door. A tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit stepped out. His name was Ethan Blackwood. Everyone in the city knew who he was. He was the billionaire founder of Blackwood Enterprises, a business empire that owned hotels, technology firms, and commercial buildings across the country. Newspapers described him as brilliant, disciplined, and emotionally distant. He rarely gave interviews and almost never attended social events unless business required it. Yet every morning, despite having private chefs and luxurious offices, Ethan entered the tiny cafe alone. He always chose the same booth beside the window. He always ordered exactly the same thing. 1 black coffee, please. Nothing more. No pastry. No breakfast. No conversation. Emily would place the steaming mug on the table, and Ethan would quietly thank her with a polite nod before opening a folder filled with business reports. 20 minutes later, he would stand to leave. Beneath the bill, he always placed one crisp $10 note. Exactly $10. Never 5. Never 20. Never loose change. The routine never changed. Not during snowstorms. Not on holidays. Not even on his birthday, when reporters waited outside hoping for photographs. For 2 years, Emily watched the same ritual unfold every single morning. At first she assumed it was coincidence. Then she realized it was intentional. Her coworkers often joked about it. Maybe it's his lucky number. No billionaire carries cash unless there's a reason. Perhaps he's secretly testing the staff. Emily laughed along, but privately, her curiosity continued to grow. Why exactly $10? Why every single day? One cold autumn morning, after spending the previous night worrying over another overdue rent notice and Noah's rising hospital bills, Emily felt emotionally exhausted. As Ethan finished his coffee and placed the familiar $10 bill beneath the receipt, she took a deep breath. Before fear could stop her, she spoke. Mr. Blackwood. He looked up from the table, meeting her eyes for what felt like the first time. I hope you don't mind me asking, she said softly. But, why do you always leave exactly $10? For several long seconds, the cafe seemed to fall completely silent. Ethan stared at the crisp note resting on the table. His usually unreadable expression softened with quiet sadness. Finally, he looked back at Emily. His voice was calm, almost fragile. Because, he said, $10 once saved my mother's life. Emily stood frozen beside Ethan's table. His quiet words lingered in the air. Because $10 once saved my mother's life. The usual chatter of the cafe returned around them, but for Emily, everything else seemed to fade into the background. She had expected an amusing answer, perhaps that $10 was his lucky number or simply a habit. Instead, she had uncovered a memory that clearly carried years of pain. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean to bring up something so personal. Ethan looked at the untouched coffee cup in front of him and gave a faint shake of his head. You don't need to apologize, he said. No one has ever asked before. He folded the newspaper beside his plate and leaned back in his chair. For the first time in 2 years, he wasn't in a hurry to leave. My father died when I was 7, he began. He left behind debts instead of savings. Overnight, my mother lost everything. We moved into a tiny apartment, and she worked double shifts as a waitress just to keep food on the table. Emily listened quietly, unable to look away. One winter, Ethan continued, my mother became seriously ill with pneumonia. She refused to miss work because we couldn't afford to lose a day's wages. She could barely stand, but she kept serving customers with a smile. He paused, remembering every detail. That morning, a man came into the diner. He ordered coffee and toast. Before he left, he placed a $10 bill on the table. Ethan smiled sadly. It wasn't a fortune. Even then, it wasn't enough to change someone's life forever. But for us, it changed everything. Emily frowned slightly. How? My mother used it to buy medicine after work. With the few coins she already had, she bought a loaf of bread and a carton of milk. We had dinner that night because of that tip. He looked down at his hands. She recovered a few weeks later. Before she died years afterward, she told me something I'll never forget. His voice softened. Ethan, never measure kindness by its size. Measure it by what it means to the person receiving it. Emily felt tears sting her eyes. She said that if I ever became successful, I should never forget what $10 meant to a struggling family. So you made a promise, Emily said gently. Ethan nodded. The day I signed my first £1 million business contract, I remembered that morning. I promised myself that every working day, no matter where I was in the world, I would leave a $10 tip for someone serving coffee. Emily looked at the crisp note still lying beneath the receipt. So every tip is for my mother, Ethan finished. It's my way of thanking the stranger whose kindness gave us another chance. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Emily smiled through her tears. I think your mother would be proud of you. Ethan looked surprised. Most people praised his business success or admired his wealth, but no one had ever spoken about his mother with such warmth. A genuine smile slowly appeared on his face, the first Emily had ever seen. Thank you, he said quietly. As he stood to leave, he placed the familiar $10 bill into her hand instead of leaving it on the table. Keep believing that small acts of kindness matter, Emily, he said. Sometimes they're the only reason someone makes it to tomorrow. Emily watched him walk out into the crisp morning air, feeling that something had changed between them. He was no longer just the mysterious billionaire who drank black coffee every morning. Behind the expensive suit was a little boy who had never forgotten the stranger whose simple generosity had given his family hope, and that quiet promise was only the beginning of a story that would transform both of their lives. After their conversation, the mornings at Maple Street Cafe felt different. Ethan Blackwood still arrived at exactly 7 o'clock every weekday. His black sedan stopped outside with the same precision, and he still ordered one plain black coffee. But now, instead of exchanging only polite nods, he and Emily shared a few quiet moments before the breakfast rush became overwhelming. Sometimes they talked about the weather. Sometimes about books. Occasionally, Ethan asked how Noah was doing in school. The conversations were brief, but they became the part of Emily's day she looked forward to most. One chilly Tuesday morning, Ethan noticed dark circles beneath her eyes. You look tired, he said gently. Emily forced a smile. Just a busy week. Ethan studied her face for a moment. He had spent years reading business partners and competitors, and he knew when someone was hiding the truth. "You're working too much." She laughed softly. "Someone has to pay the bills." Before he could ask another question, another customer called for service, and Emily hurried away. A few days later, Ethan left the cafe earlier than usual. Instead of getting into his car, he quietly walked around the corner and waited. Nearly an hour after Emily's shift ended, she emerged from the cafe, changed into a worn jacket and comfortable trainers. Instead of heading home, she boarded a city bus. Curious, Ethan instructed his driver to follow from a distance. The bus stopped outside a small grocery store. Emily spent nearly half an hour comparing prices, carefully counting every pound before choosing the cheapest bread, vegetables, and milk. She put several items back after realizing she couldn't afford them. From there, she walked to the local hospital. Ethan watched through the entrance doors as she smiled brightly the moment she entered a young boy's room. The exhaustion disappeared from her face. The boy, Noah, grinned as she unpacked the groceries and helped him with his homework. A nurse passing by recognized Ethan from the newspapers. "You must be here for Miss Carter," she said. Ethan looked surprised. "You know her?" The nurse smiled warmly. "Everyone here does. She spends almost every evening with her younger brother. His kidney treatments are expensive, but she never complains. She even volunteers in the children's ward whenever she has spare time." Ethan stood silently. "And she works 2 jobs, the nurse continued. The cafe in the mornings and a cleaning job at night. I honestly don't know how she keeps going." For the first time in years, Ethan felt ashamed of how easily he had taken comfort for granted. The following morning, he quietly contacted his accountant. "I want Noah Carter's outstanding hospital balance paid immediately," he instructed. "Should we tell the family who made the payment?" the accountant asked. "No," Ethan replied. "Make it anonymous." Later that afternoon, the hospital informed Emily that an anonymous donor had settled several of Noah's overdue medical bills. Emily stared at the paperwork in disbelief. "There has to be a mistake," she insisted. "There isn't," the receptionist assured her. The next morning, Emily placed an envelope on Ethan's table before serving his coffee. Inside was a bank check for the exact amount that had been paid. "I believe this belongs to you," she said quietly. Ethan looked up, surprised. "You know it was me?" "I guessed," Emily admitted. "There aren't many people who could help like that." "You need it," Ethan said. She gently pushed the check back towards him. "So does my pride." For a long moment, Ethan simply looked at her. Then he smiled with quiet admiration. In a world where people constantly wanted something from him, Emily Carter had become the first person to refuse his money, not because she didn't need it, but because she wanted to stand on her own feet. At that moment, Ethan realized it wasn't just her kindness that made her extraordinary. It was her unwavering dignity. Emily thought returning Ethan's anonymous gift would put an end to the attention. Instead, it marked the beginning of something neither of them expected. Their quiet morning conversations continued, but they did so under increasingly watchful eyes. The regular customers noticed that the billionaire CEO now lingered for a few extra minutes after finishing his coffee. The cafe staff noticed him smiling more often than before. Soon, whispers spread beyond the little cafe. "Why does Ethan Blackwood keep visiting that waitress? Are they secretly dating? Is she after his fortune?" Within weeks, gossip columns and entertainment websites were publishing blurry photographs of Ethan sitting by the cafe window while Emily refilled his coffee. Reporters camped outside the cafe, hoping to capture a dramatic moment that would confirm their rumors. Emily hated every minute of it. One afternoon, a photographer stepped in front of her as she left work. "Miss Carter. Are you the billionaire's new girlfriend? Did you plan this relationship? Is he paying your bills?" Emily lowered her head and hurried away without answering a single question. By the time she reached the hospital to visit Noah, she was fighting back tears. "I never wanted any of this," she whispered to herself. Meanwhile, Ethan was furious. His assistant suggested releasing a brief statement denying the rumors, but Ethan refused. "The truth will come out on its own," he said calmly. A few days later, an investigative journalist named Daniel Brooks decided to uncover the real reason behind Ethan's daily cafe visits. Certain he had discovered a corporate scandal, Daniel began researching Ethan's past. What he found surprised everyone. Hidden inside the city's historical archives was a faded newspaper photograph taken nearly 25 years earlier. It showed a young waitress standing outside an old neighborhood diner with her little son beside her. The little boy was Ethan. The waitress was his late mother. The article described a local fundraiser organized after the woman recovered from a serious illness. In the interview, she spoke about an anonymous customer whose £10 tip had helped her buy medicine and food when she had nothing left. Daniel compared the old photograph with Ethan's daily routine. Suddenly, everything made sense. The billionaire wasn't visiting the cafe because of a romance or a publicity stunt. He was keeping a promise made to his mother. The story was published the following Sunday under the headline, "The Billionaire's £10 Promise, a Mother's Lesson That Changed Thousands of Lives." By Monday morning, the article had spread across the country. Readers were deeply moved by the story. Social media filled with messages about kindness, gratitude, and remembering humble beginnings. People began leaving £10 tips for waiters, waitresses, delivery drivers, baristas, and hotel staff, sharing photographs online with the hashtag the £10 promise. The movement grew faster than anyone imagined. Even celebrities and business leaders joined in, encouraging others to perform simple acts of generosity. Reporters returned to the cafe, but this time, they weren't chasing scandal. They wanted to meet the waitress whose simple question had inspired Ethan to share his mother's story with the world. Standing nervously before a row of microphones, Emily smiled. "I didn't change anything," she said honestly. "I only asked a question." Mr. Blackwood reminded us that kindness doesn't have to be grand to matter. Sometimes the smallest gift arrives at the moment someone needs it most. Across the street, Ethan watched the interview from inside his car. For the first time in many years, he felt that his mother's promise no longer belonged only to him. It had become a legacy of hope, one that was spreading from one £10 tip, one kind heart, and one simple question at a time. The #the10 promise movement swept across the country faster than anyone could have imagined. Restaurants reported record-breaking tips. Cafe owners placed small signs near their tills encouraging customers to share acts of kindness. Newspapers published stories of waitresses paying rent, students buying textbooks, and struggling families receiving unexpected help, all because one billionaire had kept a promise to his late mother. Maple Street Cafe became a place of inspiration. Customers traveled from different cities just to enjoy a cup of coffee where Ethan Blackwood had started his daily tradition. Business doubled within a month, and the once quiet cafe was now filled from opening until closing. Emily was happy for her boss, Mrs. Wilson, whose little cafe was finally thriving. But the attention came with a price. Not everyone believed Emily's story. Some people insisted that no billionaire would spend so much time with an ordinary waitress unless there was another reason. Online gossip grew louder, and television hosts speculated that Emily had cleverly earned Ethan's sympathy to secure a wealthy future. The cruel comments hurt, but Emily ignored them. Unfortunately, someone else decided to take advantage of the situation. Victor Langley, a senior executive at Blackwood Enterprises, had spent years waiting for an opportunity to undermine Ethan's leadership. Jealous of the public admiration Ethan was receiving, Victor secretly contacted several tabloids with fabricated stories. According to the false reports, Emily had deliberately manipulated Ethan by pretending to struggle financially. Anonymous sources claimed she had convinced him to pay her family's expenses and planned to influence his future business decisions. Within hours, the headlines spread everywhere. Waitress or master manipulator? Is Blackwood being used? Television crews gathered outside the cafe once again. This time, they weren't celebrating kindness. They were hunting for scandal. Emily arrived for work to find reporters blocking the entrance. "Miss Carter, did you trick Ethan Blackwood? How much money has he given you? Are you planning to marry him?" Emily squeezed through the crowd without answering. Inside the cafe, she locked herself in the staff room, tears filling her eyes. Mrs. Wilson gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't deserve this." Emily nodded quietly. "I know." That evening, after visiting Noah at the hospital, Emily made the hardest decision of her life. The following morning, she handed Mrs. Wilson a neatly folded resignation letter. "I can't let this cafe suffer because of me," she said softly. "Business was built on hope. I won't allow it to become a circus." Mrs. Wilson tried to change her mind, but Emily had already decided. News of her resignation reached Ethan only hours later. For the first time in years, his calm composure disappeared. He immediately canceled a board meeting and drove straight to the cafe. When Mrs. Wilson explained what had happened, Ethan's expression darkened. "This is exactly what she was trying to prevent," she said sadly. Ethan looked at the empty booth where he had sat every morning for 2 years. His untouched cup of black coffee grew cold. "No," he said firmly. "I'm done letting lies speak louder than the truth." Later that afternoon, Blackwood Enterprises held its annual shareholders' meeting. Hundreds of investors, journalists, and business leaders filled the grand conference hall, expecting a discussion about profits and expansion. Instead, Ethan walked to the podium and placed a single crisp 10-pound note on the lectern. Looking directly into the cameras, he said, "This isn't about business anymore. It's about honor, truth, and a woman whose integrity is worth more than my entire fortune." The room fell silent, knowing his next words would change everything. The conference hall remained completely silent after Ethan Blackwood finished speaking. Standing before hundreds of shareholders, journalists, and television cameras, he told the entire story, from his childhood in poverty to the anonymous 10-pound tip that had saved his mother's life. Then he spoke about Emily Carter. "She never asked me for a penny," he said firmly. "In fact, she returned the only financial help I ever tried to give her. She chose dignity over convenience, honesty over opportunity. If every person in my company possessed her character, we'd be the finest organization in the country." The audience erupted into applause. The shareholders, who had expected another routine business presentation, rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Even seasoned reporters lowered their cameras for a moment, moved by the sincerity in Ethan's voice. The next morning, every major newspaper carried the same story. Billionaire defends waitress, exposes false smear campaign. An internal investigation at Blackwood Enterprises quickly revealed that Victor Langley had fabricated documents, paid anonymous online accounts to spread rumors, and leaked false information to tabloids in an attempt to damage Ethan's reputation. Within days, Victor was dismissed from the company and later faced legal consequences for fraud and defamation. As for Emily, the public opinion changed almost overnight. Letters of apology arrived at the cafe from strangers who had believed the gossip. Customers returned, not out of curiosity this time, but out of respect. Many thanked Emily for reminding them that kindness and integrity still existed. Although Mrs. Wilson welcomed her back with open arms, Emily surprised everyone. "I'll help whenever you need me," she said with a smile, "but it's time I chased the dream I put aside years ago." Using money she had carefully saved over the years, and a scholarship quietly arranged by an anonymous donor, Emily enrolled in nursing school at last. She never asked who had created the scholarship. She already knew. Several months later, Ethan invited Emily to the grand opening of a new charity in the very building where the old cafe once stood. Above the entrance was a simple bronze sign. The 10-Pound Promise Foundation. Its mission was clear: to provide emergency grants, medical assistance, educational scholarships, and financial support for waiters, waitresses, baristas, delivery drivers, and other service workers facing unexpected hardship. "Wealth can build buildings," Ethan said during the opening ceremony. "But kindness builds lives." Emily stood beside him as dozens of families received their first grants. She saw tears of relief, grateful smiles, and children hugging their parents with hope shining in their eyes. Before the ceremony ended, Ethan handed Emily a small white envelope. Inside was a perfectly crisp 10-pound note. She looked at him, confused. "I don't understand." Ethan smiled. "This isn't a tip." He gently folded her fingers around the note. "It's a reminder. A reminder that the smallest act of kindness can become someone's greatest turning point." Emily's eyes filled with tears. Months later, after graduating as a registered nurse, she returned to Maple Street Cafe for the first time in her new uniform. On the wall near the entrance hung a wooden frame. Inside it was the very first 10-pound note Ethan had ever placed beneath his coffee cup after telling her his story. Below it was a small engraved plaque. "Kindness is never measured by the amount you give. It is measured by the hope you leave behind." As Emily smiled at the familiar booth by the window, a young waitress served an elderly customer his morning coffee. When he left, she discovered a crisp 10-pound note beneath the receipt. She looked around, searching for the stranger who had left it. He was already gone. But his kindness remained. And so did the promise.